I'm Natasha Sandmeier. I teach the entertainment studio at the Ideas campus, and I'll be doing the presentation today. Joining us, we also have Tess Stevenson from Communications Department, Kat English from Outreach, and Jim Keys from Student Affairs Office, who'll be here to answer any questions you may have. So I just want to welcome you to our talk today. I'm going to be screen sharing in a second. On behalf of our chair, Heather Roberge, and the faculty and staff at UCLA Architecture and Urban Design, thank you so much for joining today's open house and for your interest in the M.S.AUD post-professional program. Okay, I'm going to share screen. So this session will last about an hour, and I'll spend the first half talking about the program and the culture at UCLA Architecture and Urban Design, AUD. And after that, we'll have a Q&A where I can answer broader questions about the curriculum and Ideas campus. And if you have any questions about about admissions, please feel free to ask them along the way, and our team will respond in the chat window, or we'll get to those answers afterwards. So, as many of you know, the city of Los Angeles is a global hub of innovation. It's home to about 10 million people within a 60-mile radius, so a really huge dispersed city. There are about 150 languages spoken here from all the various communities and cultures, and it's one of the most diverse and complex populations in the world. It's a global hub of innovation and one of the largest concentrations of high technologies industries, and of course, as we know with Hollywood, a center for entertainment. And so the city itself is really right now dealing with issues of growth and mobility and density and how to become a sustainable city. It's transformed itself quite a lot over the last 15 years with a massive influx of technology industries coming to the city. And so these are all questions that we're thinking about at UCLA AUD, and particularly at Ideas, where we focus very much on the kind of understanding of the city. So LA really is our laboratory. UCLA is one of the flagship universities in the University of California system. I think there are 9 or 11 schools in the entire system. It's ranked number one, the number one public university in the US. We have a student population of about 40,000 students in the undergraduate and grad departments, with alongside 40,000 approximately faculty and staff. And so that represents really a small city and also an incredible diversity of skills and talents and forms of research. We are a Tier 1 research university. There are Nobel Prize winners. Most notably, a few weeks ago, Andrea Getz just won the Nobel Prize for her work in astronomy and physics, and her work specifically on the supermassive black holes. And we have many Nobel Prize winners in departments all across the campus. And so this year we're celebrating our centennial. And in the 100 years that the school's been in existence, we've established really deep ties within the LA community. This is the courtyard at PERLOFF, the AUD kind of nexus. And UCLA AUD is consistently ranked among the top schools in the country for architecture and urban design. We're a department that sits within the kind of larger UCLA School of Arts and Architecture. And we are one of, I can't remember how many units. There's School of the Arts, Design Media Arts, WACD, World Arts, Culture and Dance. We have the Hammer Museum, the Fowler Museum, and of course the CAP Performance Center. And so we're really kind of broad grouping together of both public and academic institutions. So we don't just train professional architects and urban designers, we also train educators, scholars, curators, and artists. And so we see value in questioning the architect's role in society and expanding the responsibilities and creative opportunities for future architects. So I just want to show you the map. Santa Monica and the beach is over here. We've got Westwood and the mountains are all across the top. Our home on the UCLA campus is PERLOFF Hall. You just saw the photograph of that, and that sits within the UCLA campus. And then the Ideas campus is about a 15-minute drive or a 5-minute Uber and Lyft ride to Culver City. And so we are located within a kind of nexus of technology and media companies, but really importantly, we're also located next to the brand new Margot Levin Graduate Art Studio. And so we have a kind of satellite campus down in Culver City where we're working within the arts and architecture. And so there are opportunities, of course, between campuses for students to take classes both at the Ideas campus and at main campus with your critical studies and your technology studies seminars. So the M.S.AUD post-professional program is based at Ideas. And so this is one of the pictures of the kind of massive warehouse space that we occupy. And for this, I'm also going to take you on a kind of little mini tour around the building. And so Ideas really combines studio workspace, labs, and exhibition space. It's really the kind of best space for experimentation. So, you know, we're a kind of big box warehouse. We have the robots that you can see over here with Tyson, the head of our technology lab, working the smaller robots and VRs. And then behind the cage, we have the larger robots over on the right of the image. And so we really treat the space and the program as an incubator for new ideas and as a hub for industry collaborations and public events and other kinds of curatorial projects. So if you see, if you're looking at the images on the right, we have the symposium that Jeffrey and Abba in the Urban Strategy group hosted last year, bringing together really people from all over Los Angeles, from the planning department, from the water rights department, from, of course, architecture and urban design practices, to bring together a full conversation about the roles of urban strategy within Los Angeles. And our own workshop at the entertainment studio over here on the bottom left with Volker Engel, who's an Oscar-winning visual effects production designer, and Johannes Mücke, who's a UCLA graduate, an architect and production designer for films like Independence Day and a lot of other kind of science fiction films. And so you see together the kind of groupings of activities that we have where we see a student trip. We see also Greg, who leads the mobility studio, taking the studios to his office where they were working with his robot called Gita that's in production in his factory in Boston. And so the kind of range of activities and conversations we have in the studio are incredibly broad across all 4 studios. So these are some of the industry collaborations that we've seen over the past, I guess, about 8 years. Students and faculty work closely with industry partners and nonprofits across all 4 studios, entertainment, mobility, technology, and urban strategy, to consider how emerging developments in these industries might impact how we design and inhabit the built environment. And so by engaging with experts from other fields, we have the opportunity to expand architecture's field of influence and leverage design to propose alternatives, more intelligent futures. And so when you're at Ideas, you also join a team of educators and industry partners. And so Ideas is really that kind of bridge between the academic and the interdisciplinary professional realm that allows you to, I guess, stitch together kind of high concept with the practical realities of implementation. And so these are some of the previous industry collaborations that we've had with Disney Imagineering, Cirque du Soleil, with Hyperloop, Boeing, SpaceX, Unity, and BMW. So now, thinking about our space, we have a huge open studio space, and then we have the massive robot lab cage, and then a smaller one for the smaller labs. We have the VR and technology area. We have a couple of classrooms. We have a large wood and 3D manufacturing workshop, and then also a couple of offices. And so I'm going to take you kind of through the space. Let me play this. So to create and build new kinds of design concepts, the Ideas Campus provides a studio environment right adjacent to the technology lab. And that features the 4 robots. These are the 2 smaller ones, and you'll see in a minute the 2 larger ones that are actually 2 of the largest robots available in any kind of architecture school setting. These are still the small ones. So each student has the opportunity to learn robotic automation, and the workflow uses basic animation tools and is extremely user-friendly. And so simple plugins allow students to use softwares like Maya or Grasshopper to animate the robots in the digital and the physical space. And so we use them for a variety of different kind of activities where we're looking at thinking about how to operate them, as you can see here on the left, props and hands to be able to treat them in ways that we would be much more difficult manually. We use them also to sync to performance sequences. So the robots are almost actors or dancers. We use them for interactive projections and projection mapping projects. So they have that kind of ability to work synchronously and have the range of motion that accommodates really large scale interventions. So here's a kind of host of examples. Now you see a couple of the bigger ones. And so sometimes what we'll do is think about how to begin to design with the robot is less about how to maneuver the actual robot arm, but thinking about what you add to the end of the robot, because the intelligence in the robot is in what it attaches to, whether that's a printing head, a TV mount, or grabbers in order to move things. So here you can see where it was printing with clay. So that kind of informs much of the kind of design experimentation and thinking about how to kind of collaborate the built and the kind of fabrication world. So then we have adjacent to that the VR lab, and this is a really, I guess, more recent addition to the campus. And so thanks to workflows and methodologies, developed by instructors and students and specialists, we can experiment with a computer-generated input that deliver new, unique, and immersive experiences. And so the lab is equipped with, I think, 9 or 10 super powerful computers that our students are currently using, even though they are distributed in our remote teaching scenario. They're now, of course, distributed all over the world, but the students have access to the VR equipment and to the computers for rendering and using to develop our work as well. So let me run the video quick. And so this is an example of an early 1-week workshop from last year during the summer session, where students were importing their digital models into the VR scenes to be animated and transformed. And then in many cases also adding the augmented reality features to physical models and paintings. So what it means is that the way in which we kind of talk about architectural work is, you have the series of drawings that we might see in a kind of more traditional way of communicating architecture, but we also then have the physical model, then we have the digital model, and then over that we start to really think about how it can interact within the virtual realm. So I'll just let that finish playing out. So these were some, again, this is, like a 2 or 3 day studio workshop in order to think about how to transform the work of artists into a kind of 3-dimensional area. And some students took paintings and through VR allowed us to kind of enter into the landscape of the paintings, and others began to think about other ways of turning those into 3-dimensional. This one on the left, the Joseph Conrad box, had actually really interesting soundtracks to the painting. So thinking about how to overlay additional kind of sensory information on top of the artworks was a really interesting way to play with the work. And so over moving around the kind of big warehouse, this is our fabrication shop at the campus, and we offer a wide range of tools as well as more specialized machinery. Behind these 2 doors over here, we have the large flatbed CNC machine. We have over on the left of the image in the room, we have a couple of laser cutting machines, and of course a whole host of 3D printers that students bring as well on their own. And so together sometimes we have 30 or 40 printers, including the kind of 10 or 15 that we have in the space. And so the ways in which we kind of work in the virtual and material is a really interesting collaboration. The shop is open 24 hours a day, and specialized tools can be used, of course, with the guidance of the shop manager, who's there for training and guidance. So moving into our main space, this large room is actually where the studio space is. So our space converts really quickly from studio space to event space. And that kind of ability to transform the nature of our work and idea exchange is a really important one for the studio. And so we've been engaging in an active public program for many years that connects us to the contemporary concerns and research in architecture. And so, in keeping with that mission, we have our own event series that are typically in symposia format that are focused on research related to individual studio topics. And that's an important part of our educational program and design of the program to really stimulate discourse with industry leaders and discover new avenues for interdisciplinary growth. This is an example of some of the exhibition work in the space. And so this is also work that was exhibited both at Ideas at the end of the year in our Rumble show that the whole school participates in, as well as then at the Architecture and Design Museum at Los Angeles, and then also traveled on to the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York. So, thinking about the ways in which we communicate our work and research at our campus, but also always thinking about how to move it out into the world. So these are some images of reviews and discussions and exhibitions. We bring in collaborators and critics from across the campus, from Los Angeles and beyond. And one silver lining of remote teaching means that, of course, all of us have brought in critics from all over the world, allowing for this kind of interface of Zoom to broaden our conversation and broaden our outrage, to really think about the exchanges possible. These are end of year images from our end of year work, exhibition of student work. And so with over more than 20,000 square feet in the studio and program installations, over 200 projects on view, and dozens of leading critics and practitioners coming to participate, Rumble is a super dynamic exploration of the issues that the next generation of architects, namely you, will face. And so it's one of the key moments when we all get to see what everyone throughout the entire school has been working on, and everybody from Los Angeles comes to see what we've been working on at UCLA. So I'll just a few details about the M.S.AUD program. It is a one-year post-professional degree, and so it offers students who already have an undergraduate in architecture to specialize your skills and apply architectural design thinking to real-world challenges outside the field. And the program is post-professional and so requires an advanced background in architectural studies. It's open to students with NAB accredited 5-year Bachelor of Architecture degree, or a graduate degree in architecture, or the foreign equivalent. So if you have any questions about that, you can contact Jim Keese will be able to answer that later on. And so each year, the program offers studios that explore relevant themes in one of our 4 research areas. And these are the 4 areas of specialization that we explore at the Ideas campus. We have entertainment, mobility, technology, and urban strategies. And those are, of course, inspired by Los Angeles's most prominent industries. So I will go through those shortly. So I teach the entertainment studio with Nathan Su. We focus on storytelling, creative content, media, and film. The Ideas Mobility Studio is led by Greg Lynn and Yara Fagali, and they really work on new models and modes of transportation, multimodal hubs, and micro mobilities. The Ideas Technology Studio, taught with Guvench Ozel and Benjamin Enemoser, and they focus on machine learning, artificial intelligence, extended realities, and immersive experiences. And then the Urban Strategy Studio, taught by Jeffrey Inaba and David Jimenez Iniesta, and they focus on urban growth, building types, and sustainability in a world kind of being overrun by climate crisis. So we also have our summer session, and our summer program is a studio of course, term about 6 weeks. And that really operates as an introduction to all 4 studios and teach some key skills in each of the areas of expertise. It worked brilliantly this summer. In previous years, we have made it more of a kind of technology focus, but this year we really taught each studio, sorry, hold on, press play. The studios were able to go through a series of guided modules. Let me turn the volume down. A kind of short sampling or taster for all of the 4 studios And because of that, what we're seeing this year is that the students have really been able to use the summer to really get into the mindset of all four studios, which means that there's a much more kind of ability to cross over between the sort of concepts that are taught across all four studios. Of course, unfortunately, we are all remote, so the kind of capacity to share that ideation across the four studios is more difficult. But the summer program then also allowed students to really understand what each studio is focused on, the forms of research taking place. Turn that down. So here you're seeing work in the mobility studio, where they're really looking at forms of kind of movement in and across space. Technology module, they had to build their own worlds as well as design avatars and masks for their characters that would inhabit these worlds. And I thought there were really interesting ways of thinking about questions of identity and enabling all of the students to kind of get to know themselves as well as their kind of their stylistic tendencies. And then urban strategy was looking at the kind of implications of fire on the city and how to begin to mediate those realities through social media. And they were creating a series of social media posts to communicate in super quick snapshots design ideas about the city. And so this is the typical study program as shown here, that it's divided by 4 quarters and requires a total of 56 units to graduate. Each studio takes place across a quarter, the technology seminar and the critical studies classes. And so that repeats across the 4 quarters. And in the spring, there's the research studio and the electives. And so what's unique about that kind of educational model is that we connect the studio course to build up across 3 quarters, and that results in a year-long body of research. Another distinction is that each studio track has a matching technology seminar that complements with the software and techniques. So really what you're seeing is a kind of educational model that's really building across 3 quarters a block of research that's not only developed through studio, but through all of the courses that kind of weaving around through it. And that focuses on that results in a very in-depth and comprehensive approach to design. Just getting a bit more into detail with the optional practical training visa, the OPT. Our program has the STEM extension, which gives you an additional 2 years onto your already 1 year opportunity to work after graduation. And so that means international students holding F1 visas will be eligible for the OPT extension. So the normal visa is 1 year long. The extension provides you an additional 24 months for a total of 3 years. So I just want to go into the studios quickly, show you samples of work from each of the 4 studios. This is the mobility studio taught by Greg Lynn with Yara Fagali. And so the studio really focuses on the dynamic aspects of architecture, people in motion, and looking at the kind of smart systems that enable and facilitate that kind of motion. Looking at machines in particular, vehicles of all sizes and speeds, pretty much from the scooter or the kind of cart that holds your bag or briefcase entering the office on a conveyor belt, through to moving large scale infrastructures in and through buildings. And so they're thinking about the role of machines and our ability to kind of not only cohabit but co-work, and thinking about that kind of intertwining between people and machines, how that will challenge the existing thresholds between buildings and transportation infrastructures. Most buildings have parking below or parking outside, and then a kind of static, I guess, the buildings we all know and love, without the kind of idea of movement systems being so prevalent in them. And thinking about the ways in which our world is so quickly changing, it's an opportunity now to think about the ways design and spaces and environments can be shared by people and machines. So you'll often see, of course, the kind of movement of, in that image, the kind of technology systems. Here, a version of the Gita that Greg has been developing independently, as well as different kinds of infrastructures that make spaces much more efficient. And so we're thinking about those problems as technical currently, and not spatial or experiential. And mobility studios are really thinking about how to convert those into experiential questions and not problems. And so that includes issues of volume, degrees of enclosure, shade, illumination, information. And those are all ways that are being kind of challenged in order to think about the ways we can transform our architecture. This year's research in particular, although this is not the work from that research, this is previous years, this year's research in particular is about health density, mobility of people and air. And so in a world where we are at the moment still kind of separating and trying to distance in order not to spread COVID, what the questions of this studio are focusing on are optimization of fresh air and access by design in kind of a constructive dialogue with real world challenges. And so, of course, right now, the idea of moving in dense elevators and enclosed rooms with strangers is generally viewed with fear or trepidation. And so no one wants to get in an elevator with 20 people. And so people are thinking about how to focus design work in ways that incorporate concepts that they've been working with years past, and efficiency, movement of infrastructure and information, but also now thinking about the movement of airflow and incorporating health into questions of mobility. And so it's a really interesting way to think about how studios can also pivot in relationship to contemporary issues or crises that arise. So ideas in that sense is a very nimble program where we can adapt to very modern, very kind of contemporary questions. And so they use computational fluid dynamics as well as particle animators to simulate and inform the movement of people and air. I teach the entertainment studio with Nathan Sue. I'm just going to start our show real quick. There you go. And so the entertainment studio is really built around the practices of world building and speculative thinking. We work within the context of contemporary frictions, those tensions between technology and media and culture. And so we really use story as a device to connect those three together alongside their inevitable impacts on social, spatial, and societal structures. So ultimately what the studio has been working on and what we'll continue to do through visual storytelling is to activate the agency we as architects have in shaping the narratives and spaces of our cultures. And so whether the students are situating their projects at the leading edge of high tech or within the ultra analog, you'll be asked to incorporate the science of your world into the myth and narrative of your real fiction. And so this interrelationship between hard research and soft fiction really ensures that one gives credence and authenticity to the other. Research really does legitimize and make space for fantastical fictions. It makes them believable. And so it's almost like any episode of Black Mirror that occupies that amazing territory which constantly teeters on the line between fact and fiction. And that's the terrain we find super interesting to operate within. So this is, right now we're seeing a little clip from one of last year's projects called Forever. And that delivered a really powerful treatise on our rampant affluenza, offering an alternative to our culture of waste and anthropocentric trajectory, where here plastic has in a way been embodied with personality and character. And in a world devoid of humans, they kind of leave the city to respond to the concept that trash is of course always shipped out of cities to remain invisible. This is a film called Incognito, and it's a crime and mystery film that super skillfully wove together technology and story by channeling the minds of two investigators. There was a human police detective you can see in the police car, as well as the partner who was an artificial intelligence analyst. And so what the project was able to do was reveal the contradictions between forensic evidence, the kind of hard, cold facts of a case, as well as the inevitable fiction or somehow manipulated, remembered testimonies. And that was a really interesting project to work through a narrative. The piece playing right now is called Innermost, and this was a multiplayer game. This team really wanted to think about the role of landscape and terraforming within the context of a multiplayer game. And so the project really allowed us to think about transforming a planet as they cultivated idea the ideas of identity and community. So the studio is an interdisciplinary learning environment. We collaborate with visual storytellers, with VFX artists, with concept artists, production designers, and architects to develop the agency we have as architects and designers to speculate on and design the worlds and legends of our tomorrows. And so, as I mentioned, we focus on world building, and that you can see here in this ultra detailed packed into the single image and evidence room of that crime film that I told you about. And it contained all of the artifacts of the missing persons case. We look at colors, discussions of color, of composition, of camera and lighting, and really think about how each of those can be used to imply qualities of space and the city, as well as to imply character and emotion, cause and effect. And we deliver our fictions through the making of our environments. Another still from a film called Ecotechnium, where they looked at ways in which technology and nature constantly battle to dominate one another. And a still from the Innermost game. While our work last year was predominantly delivered through film, we did have this one team who was very much interested in thinking through the kind of questions of architecture and space and world building through a game. And that ended up being as much a soul-searching process as much as a world-building project. And then this team of students who is super driven to develop the worlds and architectures of their narrative. And so within the context of the studio, we also work with students to identify where and how they want to champion their expertise as architects in designing these stories. And some want to focus on environment design, others in crafting experience, and others in designing our futures. And that's a really kind of interesting aspect of being able to tailor a program or a set of interests to student interests. And then we have the Ideas Urban Strategy Studio, again, taught by Jeffrey Inaba and David Jimenez Iniesta. And so the ambition of this studio is to develop new tools to design the contemporary city, given the extreme changes we've witnessed environmentally and politically in recent years, and to propose urban environments that will thrive. And so this year, the group is looking at climate risk posed by California's wildfires that have threatened major cities. I will say this year, but they've threatened it for several of our recent years. And so the image you're seeing right now is from last year's studio, where they were also working with earthquake crises. And so this is a proposal for a post-earthquake Los Angeles using the debris and loose soil as the primary source for reconstruction. It's another view of the same project that shows the earthquake rubble being piled into new foundations and urban spaces for downtown Los Angeles. Play this quick. So climate change, of course, in California, but all over the world. We saw Australia's bushfires of 2019-20 season being the worst recorded in history. And 2020, again, has been the worst year of fires in California. The past 3 years have all been the worst years of forest fires in California. And so we've seen 4 million acres burned this year alone. And California had its first gigafire, which is a 1 million+ acre fire that I think continues to burn. And so thinking about how to connect architecture's building practice realities with the kind of extreme environmental realities that result possibly decades later, or issues that are really becoming into critical focus. And so this is an image from the 1950s, where as Los Angeles was building further and further into mountain wildland regions and terraforming the landscape, more and more of its land became subject to the threat of fire, including major landmarks like the Griffith Park Observatory and the Getty Center has both been under siege from fires within the last 2 years. And so both times, of course, it's been a matter of negotiating the natural fire kind of takeover alongside the preservation of our architectural landmarks and cultural landmarks. So in response, the Urban Strategy Studio is developing new kinds of topographies that can live with fire and be the basis of new zones of recreation and leisure for residents. And so this is one of the kind of summer workshop images. And this is one of the other projects that introduce new agricultural oases to protect food sources for the city in the future. And so from its settlement to LA's series of expansions and finally densification, where we are now is reimagining the land that has been a vehicle for the city to grow, and think instead about shifting the growth mindset to one of maintenance, protection, and optimization. What's really exciting about Urban Strategy Studio this year is they are taking part in a year-long study with ARC-DR3, which is a collaboration with 11 universities in the US, in Asia, and South America. And the work in Urban Strategy Studio will be presented with the other schools in an international symposium and an exhibition in Tokyo and Los Angeles, as well as a book of all the proposal. And that collaborative initiative is a hallmark feature of the Idea Studios. We're committed to finding ways to collaborate, whether with institutions in Los Angeles or around the world, and whether with research groups or companies looking to work together to forge new forms of experimentation. Ideas is a program that bridges the realm of kind of hyper-designed, hyper-academic pursuits with real-world applications and those kind of, and all the problems that you discover when you try to merge those two together. That's where the kind of interesting design solutions sit. And then lastly, I have the Technology Studio led by Güvenç Özel with Benjamin Enemoser. And students in the Ideas Technology Studio really investigate the design of new media in digital and physical forms with the potential to radically transform the human experience. And so the studio harnesses the power of artificial intelligence as a design methodology, and they also explore the worlds of gaming, robotics, and media design. In this project from, I think, last year, machine learning algorithms were trained from a database of precedent images to alter architectural form through a style transfer process. So the studio is really exploring new design methodologies derived from collaborations between AI and human agency. This year's studio is called Virtual Presence, and students are exploring the synthesized environment that enhances communication among people. And the main focus is the virtualization of architectural environments. And so as a result, each student will produce a video game version of a domestic environment, rich with media content and interactions that cater to personal and professional use. And so, as you know, we are teaching and learning remotely, and the Technology Studio has ensured that all of its students can participate with the virtual reality, the VR design work, by organizing headsets for every student, regardless of where they are. And so they just had their midterm last week, and everybody, including critics, entered into a VR space in order to review and discuss and debate the work. And that's a really kind of interesting way, again, to talk about pivoting within moments of crisis, to think about how our studios can really optimize the challenges that we face in our real lives and think about how to explore those as research projects. I'm just going to play this video of a compilation mostly of last year, I think, and the year before's work from the studio, and it shows you a few great projects that inspired the studios. And so some of these are examples of the style transfer process using machine learning algorithms that I talked about earlier. And so they also have access to the Ideas computers and the machine learning systems that they have bought over the past few years for students to be able to access those remotely. And so we're looking at a deep urbanism project where they designed a kind of deep learning algorithm to create novel urban forms. So they fed the machines with examples of thousands of cities to think about what the kind of relationship with artificial intelligence would produce as new forms of city design. So here are some of those examples. And then they also, within that, thought about the relationships not only of the kind of roles of technology, of machine learning, but of course, once those systems are designed, they really begin to think through those as kind of worlds and cities to begin to design as kind of environments as well. So what the studio operates within, I think, is a kind of really interesting spectrum of scale, from the hugely urban to what you're seeing here is the kind of very intimate kind of room-spaced worlds, especially this year where they're looking at the kind of interior domestic space, to think about how to bridge use the technology across that huge range of scales is something that I think is really unique to the program. And so these are a few projects showcasing some of the extended reality in interactive media projects that they've developed across the few years, where even any physical model, when you walk into their reviews, you don't look at a physical model in the way that we are familiar with, where you're kind of looking at the model as an object. Their models are always in full animation, operating with projection mapping, operating with a kind of understanding of not the build form as a kind of static element, but really thinking through its ability to shape the way in which we move throughout the world. And this is a kind of example of the technology seminar where students then explore the integration of digital avatars and interactive environments. And so they were working with, in this particular seminar, techniques of character development, of motion capture, and mixed reality, all taught through a series of workshops and tutorials, but understanding then very deeply the technological kind of relationship of the body, and then being able to think through, when the body is in built space, how the kind of, again, technological connections between individual and space can interact together. So here, again, samples of the masks that they designed this summer in association with the worlds that they build, really thinking about the ways as well to bridge forms and questions of design and individuality. So I think that takes us to the end of the presentation. So we'd love to open it up to questions. Again, you can ask questions about the program and admissions. Jim is here to answer questions about admissions and OPT. So I see one question in the chat. Would like to really know about the scope after the MS course job-wise. Well, yeah, that's a good question. We asked our students last night after studio, we opened up to a kind of question and answer session. This year we have students as well who've joined us from the M.Arch.II program. So we're a kind of studio of M.S.AUD students. And so students from M.Arch.II were really curious about the possibilities of job employment within M.S.AUD because it's so specialized. And I think what it does primarily is offer you many more opportunities than you would have with a kind of traditional architectural degree, because you can apply to architectural offices. You also can apply to design and media and industrial partner offices. And so what it does is really broaden your portfolio, and I think broaden the ways in which as architects we have the capacity to work interdisciplinarily. And so we have, of course, predominantly our students do stay within architecture, but for an example, we had one of our students who started work, I think 2 days after she graduated, pretty intense. And but she was working within an office that hired her not only to work as a project architect, but also to develop the visualization arm of the company. And so they were really struck with, this was a student from the crime film, and they were really struck with the ways in which that film kind of stitched together concepts of architecture and space and the world alongside narratives of how to inhabit those. And they asked her if she would be interested in setting up a visualization department within the office as well. And so thinking about the ways in which we can be nimble in broadening the relationship between architecture and other disciplines, I think means that you can really expand the scope of where your interests lay and how you can begin to bring architecture into a whole range of other disciplines. I hope that answers your question. I mean, certainly people from all the studios work across a range of disciplines that are not only within architecture. Technology students, many of them go on to work at Google or in VR. We have mobility students who work in large-scale planning departments, as with the urban design students work in architectural practices that focus on urban strategy or on mobility infrastructures, or work within the departments like Gita Robots, or within the LA planning office. We also have students that go and work directly for the mayor. Any other questions that I may be able to answer? Pop them in the chat. also stop share, or I leave the email up so you have that for reference. You're welcome. Thank you for thanking. Hi, Dilara. The number of students for each studio tend to stay around 18. That's the number we look at. It kind of creates a really great group to work with. So it's larger than a normal studio, which is usually around 12. We like to work at 18, but also we have 2 faculty members teaching in the studios, so we can accommodate that kind of broader discussion. Yeah, so if we think about the Ideas Campus space, the big kind of square, I'll use my Zoom screen as our Ideas Campus space. This whole area, wait, my screen is mirrored. This whole area is all kind of, half of it is studio space. And so each studio has an area of about 18 desks. And then we have big discussion tables where we all come together as groups to discuss the kind of research questions that are unfolding within the studio. And so sometimes we're able to bring those conversations together across studios as well. What's great about the big open space is those ideas are then able to be kind of carried through. So it's about 18 per studio. Some years more. This year, I think I have 16. I have a Q&A in, let's see. Does your research determine the kind of career path you follow into post-graduation? I mean, it can, certainly if you want it to. I think there are many students who come to the program who are interested in a body of research, but want to stay within their kind of field. There are students who absolutely want to go into a new direction. And so I think that's a really personal and independent question. I think what the studio enables us to do, the Ideas Campus and the program enables us to do, is to reveal to you the questions that you find burning, that you don't want to just use to, I guess, to work through for the year, but we're looking also for you to find the questions, desires, and interests that will launch your career. So we view the program not as a kind of 1-year contained academic study, but rather a 1-year kind of launch pad for your futures. I think that's the way we kind of think strategically about the program. What kind of graduate employment opportunities are there to help offset the cost of attending? Well, again, I mean, I think I'm answering it with the other questions, is that you have the opportunity to offer to any office or practice, whether design, media, architecture, urban planning, design, and technology, whether you offer a range of skills and a range of abilities to pursue design questions, technology questions that are really changing the ways in which we live, design, and kind of inhabit the world today. And I think that is a hugely valuable thing to be able to communicate to employers, to be able to communicate to researchers, to be able to communicate through grant applications. And I think you would be, in a way, investing in your own capacity to offer so much more. And that is a really valuable commodity. I mean, I know from personal experience, I had a student who graduated in June. She's quite young. I think she may have turned 24 during the year, and she did her undergraduate. She then did the program at M.S.AUD, and then she was working briefly at an office locally, and then moved up to San Francisco. And she texted me a couple of weeks ago because she was negotiating her contract, and so we were suggesting numbers that she could bring forward, and now she's earning more than I am. She's earning more than all of us, pretty much. And that's within the architectural realm. Again, that company also wanted to take on her ability to think through narrative storytelling through visualization. And so it's a real partnership for her between that kind of concept of visualization and building architectures. And so I think there are, if we're just looking at the kind of fiduciary elements, huge opportunities once you have a specialized degree. What would you like to see? Which would you like to see? Simple portfolio or graphic one? I say deliver the portfolio you think communicates the most interesting kind of story about you, your work, and your research. I don't know what you call a simple portfolio. Most of the portfolios we see are two-dimensional. I mean, we ask for PDFs, although if you do have websites or film work or animations, feel free to pop the link somewhere on the page, and we always copy paste into to look at the web content.
I would just add, sorry, Natasha, to chime in on the previous question. We do also hire students in the shop and things too, right, during the year. So to help with some of the fees. I think that was part of the question
work-study
before as
program.
well. Yeah. So we hire several students in the fabrication shop and to help out in the building and with various functions for events and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's an opportunity.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Actually, Kat, while you're there, do you mind talking about the kind of outreach program and the I can't remember what you call them, but the days, the career days that we offer as well?
Sure, yes. So we have several kind of opportunities for career development, usually in the winter quarter. And we have a series of events, starting with kind of a portfolio presentation, which Natasha is helping with this year. So it's a presentation of successful portfolios, both from current students and also alumni. So you can kind of see how the experience you have in architecture, and then on top of that, the experience you have at ideas can kind of tell a story that would kind of sell your skills to a company that you're looking at. And then we have a portfolio workshop, which is typically where we have lots of our alumni come and spend their time kind of talking to you, giving you feedback on your presentation, on your portfolio and resume. And that's also, a great networking opportunity to meet some of our alumni. And then the last event is Career Day, where we bring in companies from architecture, but also various backgrounds that we have relationships with, and they share more information about internships and jobs that they have available. So we really, in the winter quarter, try and kind of get you thinking about that early, so that you can apply and hopefully have something lined up for the summer. But we also, through the year, if companies can't come to our career day, there'll be various presentations, and I send a weekly email with opportunities and events and ways to kind of engage with different communities within Los Angeles too. So there's lots going on to try and kind of connect you with the architecture and further communities in Los Angeles all throughout the year, not just at the end of the year when you're applying.
Okay, any other questions? Indu has asked, thank you for the introduction. I was wondering if the Urban Strategy Studio also experiments with sites outside of Los Angeles to be able to adapt to different contexts. Yes, absolutely. And so all of our studios do focus within Los Angeles in terms of the kind of conversations we have with our industry partners, but certainly the kind of design questions are able to bridge a whole range of spaces and places across the world. This studio this year is looking at fire, and that has happened in the past, I guess, 5 or 10 years, more commonly throughout the world. And so some of the projects do occupy sites outside of LA, but predominantly what all of the studios do is think through the problems that are taking place across the world, or let's say problems that are global issues, and look at addressing them through sites that are local. And so this year, because we are remote, of course, the kind of form of research is less local than usual. But in general, even if the sites are Los Angeles based, they are approached through a global mindset, understanding absolutely that our students are hugely of international kind of coming together. We have students from all over the world. And so it's important that we address all the problems, not with necessarily site specific solutions, but looking at issues of site that are constant throughout the world and how one can address those. So yes, the sites do kind of vary. We do also heavily weight Los Angeles. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your questions, everybody. All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, I'll leave this open for a little while. And in the meantime, just want to thank you so much for coming to the info session. We've had a few this quarter already, and I think this one will be recorded and posted online. So if you know anyone who wanted to attend but couldn't, please feel free to share that. We'll also put it on our website. And if you have any questions at all over the next few weeks and months, please feel free to email us at ideas@aud.ucla.edu, and we'll be happy to answer any and all of those questions. Hope to see your applications later on in early 2021. It's always really exciting to see the kind of work and ideas that are being communicated to us through the portfolios. And we look forward to seeing your application.